Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the life and crimes of Frederick Charles Wood, an American serial killer.
Sounds pretty intense.
It is. We've got some excerpts from a Wikipedia article. Gives us a fascinating look into, well, a pretty dark chapter of history, you could say.
Always up for a good mystery. What makes this guy's story so special?
Well, this guy's story is really something else. He committed his first murder at 14. 14.
Wow, that's young.
Spent a good chunk of his life in prison, in and out, and he really seemed to thrive on notoriety, even cracking jokes about his crimes.
That sends chills down my spine. I mean, what makes someone like that tick?
That's what we're here to find out. It's a story that really forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil and the limits of our justice system.
I can already tell this is going to be a heavy one.
It is. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Wood was born in 1911
Okay.
in Elmira, New York. That was a pretty normal start, right?
Yeah, small town, humble beginnings, the classic setup.
But even in those early years, there were signs of trouble.
Oh, like what?
Well, as he got older, he started dabbling in, petty crimes.
The usual teenage rebellion stuff.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
But then, at 14, he commits his first murder.
Oh, wow, who didn't waste any time?
He poisons his 16-year-old girlfriend, Cynthia Longo.
What?
Arsenic-laced cream puffs.
Cream puffs. That's so bizarre and cruel.
It's a detail you can't forget. That this seemingly innocent treat was used as a tool for something so horrific.
It's almost like something out of a dark fairy tale.
14 years old.
Yeah.
Just mind-blowing. And to make matters worse, the coroner at the time
Yeah.
completely missed the mark. Diagnosed the cause of death as heart problems.
So he got away with it.
Scot-free. You have to wonder, how many warning signs were missed.
Right. Like, could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had intervened?
Exactly. It's a question that haunts a lot of these cases.
Yeah, I can see why. So he gets away with murder. What happens next?
Well, unsurprisingly, he doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Spends his teenage years in and out of trouble.
What kind of trouble?
Even lands himself in a mental hospital at one point.
Interesting. Was he diagnosed with anything?
Well, what's interesting is that during his time there, they assessed his IQ, and it was average.
Really? Average intelligence, but capable of such a calculated, cold-blooded act?
It's one of those things that makes you question our assumptions about intelligence and morality.
For sure. It's clearly more than just IQ that contributes to criminal behavior. There are so many other factors at play.
Absolutely. So, as you can imagine, his criminal activity didn't really let up.
Of course not.
Eventually lands him in prison for grand larceny and auto theft.
So even at this stage, it was pretty clear he was troubled.
Oh yeah, definitely. But even prison doesn't seem to deter him. In fact, his violence actually escalates after his release.
Oh no. What happened?
In 1933, he murders Pearl Robinson. Brutally.
How brutally are we talking?
We're talking 142 stab wounds.
142. That's just... I can't even comprehend that level of rage.
It's unimaginable. And to make matters worse, he's completely overlooked as a suspect.
What? How is that even possible with such a crime that violent?
Well, it really speaks to the limitations of, forensic science and investigative techniques at the time.
So another life lost and justice delayed.
But he does end up back in prison for harassing another woman.
It seems like a pattern is emerging here. Crime, punishment, release, then even more violence.
Exactly. And it continues. In 1942, he murders John Lohman. And this time, justice is served.
He's finally held accountable.
He's sentenced to 20 years to life. But even in this moment of, I guess you could call it justice, there's a twist. The judge, when handing down the sentence, states that Wood should never be released.
Wow. Explicitly acknowledging the danger he posed.
And then, right before his sentencing, Wood attempts suicide.
A suicide attempt. Was it a genuine cry for help or a manipulative act? It's hard to say.
It really adds another layer of complexity to his character. On the one hand, you have this cold-blooded killer.
Right.
Capable of unimaginable cruelty. But then you have these moments of, what could be despair or remorse.
It's almost like a glimpse into a tortured soul. Or maybe it's all an act.
Exactly. And those complexities are what make this case so fascinating.
It's not just a simple story of good versus evil. It's much more nuanced than that.
It forces us to grapple with the nuances of human behavior, the limitations of our justice system.
Right. And the big question, can people like Frederick Charles Wood truly be rehabilitated?
So he's locked up Deemed too dangerous to ever be released. Case closed, right?
You'd think so, but with a story like this, I doubt it's that straightforward.
Well, you'd be right. In 1960, despite the judge's very clear warning, Wood is granted parole.
They let him out. Seriously. It was a controversial decision, a lot of pushback, even from judges and prosecutors who knew his history, but somehow the parole board, they believed he had been rehabilitated.
A tragically misplaced assumption, as we're about to find out.
To say the least.
So Wood's out on parole. He's given a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild his life. What does he do with it?
Well, initially he tries to go straight, settles in Albany, gets a job at a laundry.
So far, so good.
But it seems like the weight of his past, combined with the challenges of reintegrating back into society, it proved too much. He ends up quitting his job due to some health issues, breaks parole, and makes a beeline for New York City.
New York City in the 1960s, a melting pot of dreams and dangers. What happens to Wood in this new environment?
It's almost like the city itself awakens something sinister within him.
Oh, no.
This bloodlust, as some sources describe it, resurfaces with a vengeance. Within weeks of arriving, he commits a double murder.
Here we go again, another descent into darkness. Who are his victims this time?
John Richigneau, a 62-year-old World War I veteran, and Frederick Sess, his 78-year-old roommate. They become his final victims.
Wow. So how does this all unfold?
It all starts with a seemingly harmless encounter. Wood meets Richigneau while panhandling on Broadway. They strike up a conversation, share some drinks.
Okay.
Richigneau may be feeling a sense of camaraderie or pity, invites Wood back to his apartment in Astoria.
A simple act of kindness turning into a nightmare. It's hard to believe how quickly things can spiral out of control.
It really is. So what happens at the apartment, according to Wood's confession, Richigneau makes what Wood refers to as an indecent proposal.
Oh, what?
Leading to an argument fueled by alcohol and rage. Wood attacks Richigneau,
This is tough to hear.
first striking him with a beer bottle, then slashing his throat with the broken glass, and finally beating him to death with a coal shovel.
Just brutal. And what about Sess, the roommate?
Tragically, Sess is awakened by the commotion and also falls victim to Wood's rage. He's murdered with the same broken beer bottle.
Oh, my gosh.
But here's where it gets really chilling after the murders. Instead of fleeing the scene, Wood takes the time to write 2 notes, which he leaves in the kitchen.
Notes, what did he write? A confession and apology?
One note is a sarcastic apology, almost mocking the situation. But the other note is even more disturbing in it. He praises the parole board, calling them real intelligent people for releasing him.
He's taunting them. It's like he wants them to know that he committed these horrific acts because they gave him the opportunity.
Right.
He's reveling in the chaos and making sure everyone knows they made a terrible mistake.
It's a chilling reminder of his complete lack of remorse and his twisted sense of humor. He's not just a cold-blooded killer, he's a manipulator, a showman who seems to derive pleasure from the fear and outrage he generates.
So how was he caught this time? Does he just wait around for the police to show up?
He does leave the apartment, actually spends a few days wandering the city. He even continues to stalk women looking for more potential victims.
Unbelievable.
But this time, fate intervenes in an unexpected way.
Fate, tell me more.
It's a local radio news director, Michael J. Morgan, who cracks the case.
A radio news director.
Yeah. Morgan had been following the news about the double murder in Astoria, and he noticed some eerie similarities to the murder of John Lohman back in 1942.
Oh, wow.
He remembers that Wood had been convicted of that murder, and crucially, that he had recently been paroled.
Talk about a good memory and a sharp mind. This news director is like a real-life detective piecing together the clues that everyone else missed.
Exactly. Morgan contacts the police with his suspicions, leading them to focus their investigation on Wood, and when they finally confront him...
I bet he denies everything, tries to come up with some elaborate alibi.
Not even close. He confesses not just to the murders of Richigneau and Sess, but also to the earlier murders of Cynthia Longo and Pearl Robinson. He lays it all out on the table, seemingly without a shred of remorse or hesitation.
It's mind-boggling. What was the reaction to his confession?
Public outrage, especially directed at the parole board who had set him free. The chairman of the board was actually forced to issue a public statement admitting that paroling Wood had been a mistake.
Yeah, mistake doesn't quite cut it. So he confesses to 4 murders. Did they even bother with a trial?
There was a trial, but it was unlike any you'd imagine. Wood, going against the advice of his lawyers, insisted on testifying.
Why on earth would he do that? It seems like a terrible legal strategy.
It all goes back to his need for attention, his desire to control the narrative. He wanted a platform, and the trial provided just that. During his testimony, he openly admitted to his crimes, claiming he was sane when he committed them, even declaring that he loved killing.
He loved kill. It's like he's not even human. He's a monster.
That's how it appeared to many throughout the trial. He behaved erratically, joking, acting jovial, showing absolutely no remorse.
It's just chilling.
There's one moment that really captures his disturbing personality. When asked about his occupation, he replies with a smirk that he's a wine sampler.
A wine sampler. It's a dark, flippant remark that sums him up perfectly. A man who takes pleasure in the suffering of others, who sees his own murderous rampage as some kind of sick joke.
Exactly. The jury, after deliberating for less than 75 minutes, found him guilty on all counts. In December 1961, he was sentenced to death and sent to Sing Sing to await execution.
Finally, justice is served, case closed, right?
Well, not quite. Even in the face of his impending execution, the story of Frederick Charles Wood takes a few more unexpected twists and turns.
So Wood's on death row at Sing Sing. Seems resigned to his fate, even eager to face his execution. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but of course with Wood, nothing is ever that straightforward.
You're telling me, even with his apparent willingness to, as he put it, ride the lightning, there were a few more twists and turns in store.
I can only imagine. So what happened? Were there any last-minute appeals?
His execution was actually stayed, not once, but 3 times.
3 times. Why? Were there doubts about his guilt?
Not at all. It was attorneys and civil liberties groups trying to get his sentence commuted to life imprisonment.
Interesting. What was their reasoning?
Their argument was that Wood was insane and therefore not fully responsible for his actions.
But didn't Wood himself reject any claims of insanity during the trial?
That's the irony of it. Wood completely dismissed these attempts to save him. He viewed them as meddling and reaffirmed his desire to be executed. His need for control, it seemed, extended even to the manner of his death.
It's like he saw his execution as the ultimate performance, a grand finale to his own twisted play.
You could say that. By choosing death, he maintained control, denying anyone else the power to decide his fate.
It's a chilling thought, but it makes sense considering his personality. So, what happened next? Did the appeal succeed?
In the end, the appeals were unsuccessful, and Wood got his ride the lightning. March 21st, 1963, he was escorted to the execution chamber at Sing Sing.
Wow. What must have been going through his mind in those final moments?
Witnesses say he maintained his dark humor right up until the very end. Even joked that he had an educational speech prepared. "You will see the effect of electricity on Wood," he said. "Enjoy yourself."
It's just unbelievable, turning his own execution into a spectacle.
It was a final, chilling testament to his deeply disturbed psyche. Even facing death, he couldn't resist manipulating and controlling the narrative.
So what were his final moments like? Did he put up any resistance?
None whatsoever. He sat calmly in the electric chair, even brushed it off with his hand as if it were nothing. Lit up a cigarette and waited. Some witnesses even reported he was smiling when they placed the hood over his head.
Wow, that's eerie.
Minutes later, the current surged through his body, and Frederick Charles Wood was no more.
It's a bizarre and unsettling end to a life consumed by violence and darkness. It's difficult to process everything we've learned about him today.
Wood's case is a complex and disturbing one, that's for sure. It raises more questions than it answers.
It makes you wonder about the nature of evil and the limits of our understanding.
Absolutely, and it highlights the importance of early intervention and a more humane approach to criminal justice.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating, albeit disturbing, deep dive into the life and crimes of Frederick Charles Wood.
From his troubled childhood and early crimes to his shocking end, we've uncovered a lot today.
If you're interested in learning more about this case, be sure to check out the sources we used and other resources available online.
As always, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop learning.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.